all these new characters everywhere. Pretty hyped for this, actually. Like, I didn't know initially about these new two dudes, and then I saw like some of the tech spoilers, so I knew that okay, there was going to be some of Poseidon's crew at the end of the chapter, but I didn't like know anything about these guys until I saw the the color page that was like the big spread, and next to Elsa you had these guys, Goen and Hyoka, and I just thought it was really cool to have these two characters just not really out of nowhere, but just in addition to what we had. And like I said, I'm always gonna enjoy seeing new characters, especially when they look badass. And with this, as well as the some of the dialogue from Elsie, I think that now we fully know the reasoning. I was gonna say justification, but Mishima can do whatever he wants. But the reason why Elsie is so close to the design of Urza, instead of it like Justice has his ether gear similar to the eye tattoo, but obviously Justice wasn't the first of that mark. Jalal wasn't the first of that mark. Seek-Heart wasn't the first. You have to go back all the way to Mugen, who was Mishima's original main character in the one-shot he did before Ravemaster. So obviously Mugen predates Seek-Heart. So a character like Justice being in it, it's like it wasn't just Jalal, because obviously the fact that Justice and Elsie are kind of like Jalal and Urza with the roles switched, he was going to be in there. I think you can just guess knowing the fact that this character, has been consistent throughout his work, somewhat like Plu. But with Elsie, it was like, well, why did he decide to do that with Elsie as well, from Urza? But, given this, I think just going at the chapter, I want to start with that because I think that was one of the more interesting aspects of just the reveal about Skull Fairy, is they're essentially the Fairy Tail Guild, but as antagonists, which is really cool. That makes the fact that, Elsie, being the leader, looking like Urza makes sense. And Mishima probably wanted to, have that idea of, well, the main cast isn't going to end up having the same themes as heavily as, like, family and bonds, their crew. But obviously they're close, they're very close, but it's not the same as, like, being in, being close buddies in, like, a gang, and within some form of clique, and then something like what the Fairy Tail Guild was in Fairy Tail, where they were pretty much a family without having to be connected by blood. And that seems to be the whole setup that Elsie was going for as well. We now know that she was fully aware that Jesse was a traitor. She only gave the information also to these two, Goen and Hyoka. And the whole setup was that she wanted him to kind of move away from the Interstellar Union and pretty much defect into her group. And the reason is that she's like, I wanted, to see if you would, become part of our family. And she even says, like, later when they're talking about, like, oh, we should screen more people before letting them in. This problem would happen if Elsie just didn't let anybody in. And Elsie just seems to let anybody who she thinks needs a place to go join the Skull Fairy. And that's what the Fairy Tail Guild was in a lot of ways. And also on top of that, there's like a lot of characters just in reference to the guild itself from Fairy Tail. Like you have like Max and Warren. Like you have a couple other like lower tier characters, but I mean nobody's gonna really remember them. But these two specifically, that's very interesting. Is like with Fire and Ice. Well, obviously for the most part, people are gonna think of Natsu and Gray, but it also reminds me a lot of Shuda and Julian from Ravemaster, because they're kind of like half of each of them in terms of their design, which I think that's pretty badass without it just being like, oh, it's villain versions of Natsu and Gray. It's kind of like antagonist versions of a mix between them, because before Fairy Tail you had Ravemaster, and if you haven't read Ravemaster, there was a Fire and Ice set of characters in there that had, it wasn't as focused of like their relationship, but you had these characters. I think it was Julius, not Julian. And he was essentially this ice user dude, and then Shuda, who was like this fire and explosion power guy. And they had similar kind of like a power mesh kind of like personality clash a little bit, not that much, but it is cool to see essentially what I would guess is like their characters, like the respective primary fire and ice users from each of Mishima's previous works, sort of like taken them and then worked them into this. But it's not just that, like it has to do also with their role in within this group as the personal guard of Elsie, like the princess guard, the fairy knights, and on top of that, like talking about just their backstories beforehand, like you have like I guess they were like Golan was a firefighter, Hyogo was a doctor, and so obviously extra things that has to do with one, Golan's powers. It's clearly going to be fire, even though Hyogo's is clearly going to be ice. The fact that he was a doctor means he's going to have like extra, utility instead of just however well he is at fighting. So I mean that stuff was just cool in general. I did really like that from the formatting of what we saw within this chapter. Like I said, it was really cool to find out more about the focus of the Skull Fairy group and finding out a little bit more about them, as well as like how Elsie's backstory, they're like, because part of it when she's saying how they'll accept kind of almost anybody that really needs like a place to go, needs kind of like pretty much a home. And that has to do with how Ziggy and the Eden Zero crew ended up taking her in when she was like just like pretty much a helpless like child, and that carrying over into how she is now. But I don't know, I just thought that was just really cool to see essentially her tone and her flow, because we had like started like she doesn't want to go and deal with Nero, like Poseidon Nero. She doesn't want to deal with Ziggy. She's wondering if maybe Ziggy wouldn't go confront Nero, or what exactly that situation is going to be like. But she's like, okay, we're going to do our own thing. We're going to go to this forest planet. And that's where we find out, rather, where Shiki's crew is going. And we find out where some of Poseidon's crew is going. Well, like, this chapter starts out. You have, like, the members. Now you have, like, not official members, but you have, like, Laguna, Clean, and Jin. Well, Sylph. I don't know if she's still going by Sylph. But I mean, like, Jin, even though his name is Chris, I think everybody's going to call him Jin. But he... he's still, like, not really wanting to join the crew. It doesn't look like Laguna wants to join the crew. Clean looks like she's game, because we know that she's only has this dead emotional face, or I guess emotionally dead face, because somebody stole her emotions, but she still speaks with it. She clearly has it. Like, I do like the first, like, page when you have Wise just like, what are these guys doing here? And, like, Laguna is like standing there like, I don't care, it's whatever. And then you have Jin kind of like acting like a cool guy, not even paying attention. And then you have Clean who's just like waving. She's like, hi, hello, that's me. He's talking about me. I like her. I like her so far. I'm really interested to see what she's gonna be like when she gets her personality back too. But it just has some nice little character interactions. You have like Wise like unsure of why Laguna's wearing like the stiletto shoes. Like unsure of his fashion sense, just some like comedy in there. And he's like saying how the reason he's with them in the trade-off for helping them is he wanted to leave the Sakura Cosmos because he's a wanted criminal, and he's coming to the Aoi Cosmos in order to find somewhere to be. And Shiki's just trying to be friends with them, and both Laguna and Jin are like, nope, denied. And Shiki's just like in tears. He's just sad because he wants to be friends with them. And Wise is not happy about these guys being, like, around. Obviously, he has more personal reasons to dislike Drac and Joe, so he's not going to end up liking their crew. We do find out Laguna wasn't... Like, Laguna didn't know that Drac and Joe was killing innocent people. Because when we saw, at the time of, in World 29, that Jin and Laguna both weren't for, like, watching them pretty much torture and mutilate people. Like, they were not for that. Laguna just didn't seem to be on board on that at all, and Jin had something in his backstory that he's just like, nah, I can't watch this. It was clearly triggering something from events of his past. And then, like, we get some moments where they're, like, talking to Shiki about him being the Demon King, and he's like, I don't really know if I want to be called that. That was my grandpa's title. And they're pretty much saying how that's not Ziggy's title anymore. He's the enemy now, and that is your title. You are the Demon King. And there's some more clarification to that. And it's because the way that they pretty much, in Japanese, that it's put out, like, demon and magical is kind of, it's in the same wording. I remember seeing essentially the same thing. There was, like, a part in Fairy Tail where that was described for Acnologia, because it was like a demon. He's essentially kind of like called like a demon dragon at one point, but that was kind of just like hinting at both his namesake and kind of like his presence of like this apocalyptic being, but also the fact that he ate specifically just magic in general. But it was with Shiki, it was that the demon and magic wording were kind of like they kind of swapped back, and it wasn't just like Demon King is like the title for the king of Magimek. So it's like the magical machines, obviously, these ether charged creatures. So it looks like Shiki, instead of just being called the Demon King, is going to be going instead for Magimek King, which again, it sounds nicer to him. I did notice that his ether gear looks different. Like, his ether gear doesn't look the same. And I've been wondering if his Demon King set is different than his normal ether gear set, because we know his ether lines in his standard one are green, and the ones from his Demon King form are purple. And obviously they changed like his outfit and his hair and stuff. It's a maybe. Like, the ether lines obviously differ and they change, but they seem to have like a base kind of design, unless they evolved and this is what it's going to look like now. Maybe this will just be kind of like, this design looks a little bit more simple than like what Mishima had. I don't know, because I remember there being like the rings around the knuckles, and you have like more of this like curvature. Unless maybe like this is like specifically like the way that it looks during like one of these anti-gravity techniques, and I just didn't notice before. I don't know. It's just something that I've been thinking about, wondering if if there is something different about his Demon King form than his normal ether gear form, or if it is just like, oh, it has a different process when it's it's doing different things, and in this thing, or evolved, who knows. Either way, like, Shiki liking that title was nice. I really enjoyed that part of the chapter. I already talked a lot about the stuff with Elsie. I do like these guys' designs, Goen and Hyoga. I think they both look really cool. And then at the end of the chapter, like, the rest of it is kind of just like, okay, they're going after stuff with Mother, going to this planet Forestra. The stuff with actually Xenolith it was interesting. They're saying the instructor of like Magimek Arts, he's like the founder of Gravity Ether Gear. So I'm wondering if he's the one that invented Ziggy, maybe, because they said he died 1,000 years ago. So he's obviously a very old being. Maybe he is the one that created Ziggy in the first place, and how Ziggy has the Gravity Ether Gear. Very, very, a bit of a mystery. Obviously, his character is going to have some value, some big presence in the series at some point, probably during either lore or Chronofade shenanigans. But then at the end of the chapter, we got these guys that are in Poseidon's crew. The designs are pretty cool. Like the dude Orc, he looks generally pretty cool. He's pretty big, muscular, pretty brutal looking guy. You have this girl Brittany, fairly nice design. I like her, kind of like a little bit like calm, like almost doctor-like persona, and then obviously the lab coat. This dude Mora, though, I actually really like his design. I like they kind of like, he's like set to kind of like be British, and he's got like this ghostly style hair. He's got like the weird cane and the top hat. I think he just looks interesting. He makes me think of something kind of like Willy Wonka or something, kind of like almost like a Halloween Willy Wonka. And I'm wondering if it's the B Squad, and you have Orc and whatever Brittany's supposed to be. I'm thinking that, I was thinking something like, kind of just like a mad scientist. I think the first one really that comes to mind is like, I can't remember his name, but the one from Nightmare Before Christmas. And then just, this Moore guy in general makes me think of some like weird ghosty kind of like Spectre Phantom guy. I'm wondering if Mishima set that up on purpose because it's about to enter October, and it's going to be the spooky month for Halloween. So, really hyped to see these guys. I'm guessing Orc is the strongest, but even if Moore is the weakest, if I get to see him first and he has a cool power, I'll be fine with that. I definitely want to see this guy in action, because these guys all look neat. I definitely out of these new design characters, like, Goen looks cool. Like, he definitely makes me think of like a fusion between Natsu and Shuda. In certain sense of the way. Obviously, like, he doesn't have the same character. Like, he doesn't have the same personality. I doubt he's gonna have the same role. It's just kind of like the way that, obviously, like, the fire stuff, the way that, not like, the robe looks, but also, like, the fur coating around it, a little bit in Shuda's hairstyle, a tiny bit, but but at the same time, it's like, it's still badass, and it's done in like a really cool, unique way. I love the tattoo though. But this dude Mora, so far, out of these 5, is my favorite new design. I just think he looks neat. He just looks like he's going to be a really spooky character. Probably, you know, my guess he's first out. But either way, I'd be perfectly fine with it. As long as he gets like a cool scene or two before he loses. But anyway, I mean, because these are the first one for Poseidon, so I'm doubting these guys are going to be powerful. Like, maybe I got my fingers crossed. Maybe they're kind of gonna be like the main trio in Diablos over in 100 Years Quest, where they're not the strongest, but they're the ones that we primarily see the most. You know, like even if they lose at one point, it's not like they're fully defeated and then out. It's like, oh, they retreat. You know, they get more forces, and then like other characters will eventually come back with these guys. You know, with them, but like a couple extras swapped in. I'd be pretty cool with that because I definitely want to see more of this guy. He's neat. But anyway, other than that, though, comment below. Tell me your thoughts about this chapter, and which of the 5 new designs is your favorite? I feel like most people is gonna like Goen just because he looks like a badass. I mean, the cool fiery hair, like with the hair like over the part of his face, the tattoo, the fur coating or the fur collar. He just has the most badass vibes to him. But I really like this Mora dude. I think he's just interesting. But anyway. Other than that, comment below, thumbs up the video, before the like button, subscribe button, and check out my other videos. But other than that, I appreciate everybody's already subscribed, and thank you all for listening. Bye.